Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Study Chronicles. Today we're going to be looking at 3-bet pots once again, this time from the perspective of in position. So last time we looked at the small blind versus the button from the small blind's perspective. Today we're going to look at the button's perspective. Playing in position 3-bet pots is a very key part to having a good win rate, because there is a lot of action in 6-max that you are going to be facing a 3-bet from. And so this is a very important scenario to get good at. One of the most important for the 3-bet pots is going to be the blinds versus the button. So let's jump right in. And as usual, we're going to look at the pre-flop ranges, followed by some drills, and we're going to take notes on any heuristics that we find along the way. So I have the pre-flop ranges right here for the button, general 500 GTO ranges. And we have a 43.5% open on the button. Facing a raise from the button, we'll see some hands that are going to be threshold, ace-3 offsuit, jack-3 suited, 10-5 suited, 8-5 suited, 6-4, a little bit of 5-3 suited, and then some of the offsuit weekends, like jack-8, 10-8, 9-8. Queen-8 is going to be a gap, and then king-8 and king-7. So those are the bottom parts of the button's range. Everything else is going to be very linear for value. And then we see the small blinds 3-bet. So we looked at the ranges last time for what the small blind is going to 3-bet. So we're going to just do this real quick. Bottom is going to be some offsuit broadways, some suited kings. Pocket sixes is the threshold for 3-betting, which is important to note. This does matter on some textures. It's going to come up. There is some suited connectors here starting from 7-6 suited, but nothing from 6-5 suited down. And then some of the offsuit 10-8 suited suited 10-8 combos, and all of the 9x combos. So after we 3-bet here, this is the range that is going to be important for today. It is the defending range versus the 3-bet. And we can see that we do lack some strong hands in the ace-king, ace-king, king-king region. However, we do have traps with combos like pocket aces. We have strong hands like pocket queens, ace queen suited, ace queen offsuit. So there isn't really a texture that we absolutely miss, other than king high textures are going to be at a disadvantage for the button. And you'll see that the small blind has a range bet on most of the king high textures because of that. However, we do have enough strong hands to defend on a lot of different textures, going down all the way to pocket twos, and then some strong suited broadways. So we'll have, you know, a look back and forth between the pre-flop ranges and the board textures that we are about to study. That being said, we're going to often face a bet from the small blind, as c-bet is the most common action from the small blind. If we take a look at the reports again, we can see, I think it was 34%. Yeah, 34% check. So that means we are betting about 66% of the time out of the small blind. And so facing a bet is going to be the most common scenario for the button, and it's going to be a small size at the most frequent. However, there are a decent bit of medium and large bets within the small blind strategy. So studying all of these different sizings is going to be important. You could just, if you wanted to reduce your studying, pick one of the small sizings and pick either the medium and large sizing and study those. I would probably suggest doing something like studying the 75 and then studying the 20, just so you can get an idea of the two extremes, and the 33 and the 50 are going to be somewhere in the middle, right? So that's what we'll probably, you know, take a quick look at right now. Is if the small blind bets the 20% sizing, what is the button going to respond with? It looks like we have a raise 35 and raise 55 as our aggressive plays. There are some raise 83, but I would just probably ignore that. For the most part, you can simplify to raise 35 as well as raise 55. So taking a look at raise 35, this is going to be the most frequent on, looks like ace high 10x boards, which is interesting as the button. I think this might have something to do with the fact that the small blind is pure betting ace 10x boards. And so we have a lot of combos that want to respond with aggression on those. Because it is hard for the small blinds to have hands that want to call 3 streets when they range bet on an ace 10 board other than their ace x combos. So hands like pocket kings and jacks and 10x and nines and all of these different kinds of combos are going to have a very hard time defending versus raises on texture like this, as well as the fact that the button can still have pocket aces that trap, right? They can have ace 10 suited. They can have suited aces that also make 2 pair, like ace 8, ace 7 on a ace 8 10 board or ace 10 7 board. So I think those are some of the more interesting textures that we see here for raising in position. We'll keep an eye on that. Otherwise, it looks like some queen 10 boards, some queen jack boards. We saw a little bit of the 8-7-6 3 connected card boards. Anything that's going to smash that middling range for the button call. So anything, if you see here, in this particular range for the suited broadways, right? Because that's going to consist of a lot of our range. And the ace X boards are also going to be hit strong by, these suited aces up here and pocket aces, ace jack offsuit, ace queen offsuit, etc. So there is a lot of connectivity on those textures for that. And then if we take a look at, let's look at the bet 75 now from the small blind. The button's response to that is often going to be call or jam. So the larger you go from the small blind, the facing a bet as the button, the more you're going to see call, less of a raise, more of a jam, right? Because the SPR at this point is going to be low. When small blind uses this really large sizing. And typically we're going to be facing a more polarized range when they use the 75%. And so that's going to be how you respond to that. Okay, let's have a look at some drills. So I've created the drill already to start it off, button versus small blind 3 bets. We'll just go here. Yep, looks good. 3 bet pot. All right. So facing there we go. Facing a 75% sizing, we know that we want to have either an all-in or a call. This hand performs very well with an all-in because obviously we have the nut flush draw. We're going to have a lot of equity against something like pocket jacks, something like 10x. Those are going to be, the main combos small blind wants to have this really large sizing with. Perhaps they also have something like pocket kings or queens or jacks, aces, all of that stuff. Aces, I think, is going to be doing a little bit less of that, more check, but I could be wrong. That being said, I think we can call or jam. I think we're going to be indifferent here. Typically, you want to be jamming hands that have less showdown. So, for example, if we had something like ace jack suited, that might take priority in jamming over something like ace king suited. However, against this large sizing, this is considered kind of a weak hand now, right? So against the smaller sizing, this hand would prefer calling more, and then we would raise more with something like ace 5 suited that doesn't have as much showdown value. But when we are looking to get our money in, I think we switch back to having 2 overcards for jamming. So I think this is fine either way. I'm going to call. Looks like it does pure call, which is interesting. I would have thought we could have jammed at some frequency. Let's look at my theory about jamming the less showdown heavy hands. So if we are going to jam, yeah, it does look like we are going to be jamming the weaker ace suiteds. So the ace 5, like I mentioned, is the most common one to be jamming. That's going to gain the most from jamming because if villain does have something like ace king with a king of spades, right, folding that hand is beneficial for ace 5. And then ace king and ace queen, I guess, are going to be We don't have ace king in our range, but ace queen suited is the strongest spade combo we can have, and that's going to pure call. Same with ace jack, and so it starts to jam at ace nine. So yeah, that does make sense to me because again, we want them to have some dominated combos in this spot. They could have something like ace jack with the jack of spades that we're ahead of, that might continue on a spade, stuff like that. We make the flush, and obviously we're just going to call. Villain ended up jamming queens, so very standard spot. I think a lot of players get scared after they bet 75% on the flop to check the turn. I think that's a lot of people's instinct, is to check turn or to small bet on turn. But if you see when the small blind does use the 75%, most of the time it's going to have just a jam on any turn. I think that's the most common sizing. Maybe not. Okay, I take it back. We are wrong. What about a king turn? Okay, so it looks like some turns that are good for us we are jamming, but the absolute brick turn, like a 2, I guess we can look at the reports for the turns. That'll save us some scrolling. So we do have some jams. They're mostly going to come from the Broadway turns. And then we have some jams on some 7x, 5x. So yeah, there's a lot of jam in here. But there are some, I guess, turns that prefer taking a more polarized 50-50 all-in approach. So if it goes 50, call 50 and then 30, I guess, in this scenario. But yeah, there are going to be a lot of jams on turn for the 75 sizing. So the spade, anyway, my point is that queens is still going to face a lot of weaker hands that have to call here. So if villain has something like ace 10 with an ace of spades, if villain has something like pocket nines with a 9 of spades, if villain has something, you know, along the lines of just 10x, they might need to be bluff catching at a frequency, right? Because this should be balanced, of course, once the spade comes off. So if we turn this king into a spade, we'll see how we have a lot of weaker hands for jamming as well as the stronger ones. So you can see we have some ace king offsuit. We have some, you know, all of the offsuit aces with a spade are going to mix in some jam. And I think we'll also have something like pocket sevens, looks to be mixing in a jam here, not with a spade, right? So yeah. All right, next one. So button versus small blind 3-bet, king 6 suited is in there. This is a hand that I think a lot of people will be surprised to see in a calling range versus a 3-bet, but it is in fact in there. It is a very unique hand that pops up in a lot of different ranges, especially in 3-bet and 4-bet pots. I can't explain exactly why that is, other than suited kings are going to play well. You can see there is a little tiny bit of king 7 suited in there, so it's not crazy that this hand has a higher frequency of being played. But there is like some back and forth. If you look at the two ranges, you can maybe come up with some ideas as to why the king 6 suited is in that range so heavily for defending. Maybe it's because it wants to have advantages on a 6x kind of board, because 6s are the threshold hand. And maybe if we moved up this 3-bet range to the 7s threshold, we might see king 7 suited be more valuable. I'm not sure. It's a very interesting interaction, but the one thing to know is that king 6 suited is in there. The playability of a 6 might be just better than a 7 as well on certain textures. And so also dominating hands like 7-6 suited, right? 7-6 suited, 5-6 suited, hands that also might be 3-betting with a 6 in them from the small blind, whereas the 7 may not be as big of a deal. Stuff like that, right? Like you'd have to go back and forth to really find out why the solver is using a certain combo. On this flop, obviously, I think we're just going to check. We're just going to call. and slow play here. There's no reason for us to do anything else. We just have this board absolutely dominated, and in those scenarios, we just pretty much trap. Yeah, good point, Captain Blood. Small blind doesn't 3-bet ace-6 suited. So ace-6 suited isn't in the 3-betting range, which means, again, having some coverage on 6x boards might be, you know, a priority more so than the 7x boards, because small blind should be 3-betting ace-7 suited more often. Stuff like that. You'll find a lot of reasons why the solver is doing what it's doing, even if it's not exactly apparent immediately. Jack 9, 2. This is a board texture in which I think we're going to always continue. I don't know if we want to have a raise on a texture like this. If we did, I actually think we might even be jamming. So I'm just going to call this time with this hand. Once we get to the turn and small blind checks. So here's a good heuristic for you guys. Typically, if villain uses a half pot sizing and we continue, then we're going to use the small sizing on the next street, and vice versa. If the villain uses a small sizing and then they check the turn, typically we're going to be using the medium sizing or larger sizing. So it usually kind of mirrors whatever or not mirrors, it does the opposite of whatever the other player does. And this is essentially to build out a strategy in a different SPR, right? If the SPR is larger, we don't need to go as big on turn. If the SPR is, if the SPR is larger on the turn, we need to go larger. And if the SPR is smaller, we don't need to go as large. So it's going to really depend on the SPR combined with the ranges, but for the most part, that's a pretty safe heuristic that if villain does use the medium size, we can go. So if we were to bet, I think bet 33 is going to be one of the more common sizings. Maybe we'll polarize here and go 50, but I think for the most part, we'll see the 33 or smaller. And that's what happens. And river, we're obviously just going to call the nut straight. And villain ended up having the straight with a spade, actually a really strong hand for them. Moving on, 8-7-5. This is a texture that is going to interact very well with the button. I think we're going to see a lot of checks from the small blind for that reason. And on these textures in which we have a potential range advantage, we're going to see a lot of small bets. Whereas if the board texture was something like, I don't know, ace 7 jack, that might be a texture where we would have more larger bets. So that is why I think we're going to see a lot of small bets here. We have the top of our range. We could even slow play this hand. This might be one of those trap scenarios because we have eights with the spade. It's just so good to check back. We don't need a lot of protection. We get to bet large on turn and river, and we get to control the SPR here, right? So I think bet small is fine. Check is also good. Let's go with I think it's going to be bet 20. That's going to be the most common small size that we use because, again, I think we can have a lot of betting on this texture, maybe even range. Let's have a look. And you can see that there is some check back, but most of the time we are going to bet 20 if we do bet. And again, if we look at the reports for this action, the most common sizing is going to be small when check to, right? But we do have some textures where we use 50. And like I was mentioning earlier, boards like ace jack 7, there it is right there. Boards like ace jack 7, boards like ace 10 7, boards like queen 10 7. A lot of these textures in which we have a lot of strong hands, but we're very polarized on because the hands that want to bet on a texture like, you know, ace jack 7 are going to be ace queen for 3 streets, ace jack 7 7, and that's about it. That is really happy for betting 3 streets. Pocket tens, you know, pocket aces, ace 10, you know, those combos. But for the most part, it's going to be a pretty polarized range for betting when check to, going 3 streets. So we have that 50% sizing category on textures like that. Same thing with 2 Broadway cards like queen jack X, ace queen 9, queen jack 8, So king, queen, 10. So on Broadway cards, we're going to have these more polar sizings of using the medium size. Once they check call, we're going to continue betting for sure. This is actually a really good turn card for us, which means that we can bet small again. We can go 50%. We're not probably going to use the 75% anymore. So it is important to understand when the turn is actually really good for us, because that's going to dictate our sizing. If the turn was like a king, maybe we would be more polarized, or if the turn was something like an ace, that would be the most polarizing for our range, because all of our hands like pocket jacks and tens and stuff don't really want to go three streets anymore when an ace hits. But on a texture like on a turn 2 or turn 3, we might see some more polarizing. But for this hand and this turn, I think small bet is going to be the best option, but we might see some bet 50 as well. Okay, so it was bet 50 along with 75. I guess this hand is just too strong to go into the smaller sizing. Maybe we actually just only have the 50 sizing because most of our range is just going to do well with it. Yeah, so I was wrong about the small sizing. 50 is the small sizing and on this particular turn. And if a 2 came off, I think we would see more 75 being used. Yeah, because that's going to polarize our range a lot more. Or sorry, not polarize, but is going to be the best card for our range. And then when we see the ace, this is actually the most polarizing scenario, because now we're just either checking or betting 75. And so playing around with different turns, that'll help you get an understanding of how to play in position in a 3-bet pot when certain cards come off with certain textures. So yeah, we should have bet a little larger here. Versus a check raise, I mean, we're only losing to a 6. Villain does have pocket 6s and ace 6 suited at a frequency, as well as king 6 suited and 7-6 suited. So there is straights in their range. We could slow play here in case somehow there's going to be some bluffs, because we're only getting it in against a straight at this point. Maybe some 7s, but we know that they don't have 5s. So the only hands that can really check raise here are going to be those 6x combos. So I don't mind seeing a call here and like trapping the bluffs in their range, because getting it in, we're going to mostly be behind, I think. That being said, this hand is just so strong that maybe we're trying to protect from some like check raised spades, right? Like if villain has something like ace 4 of spades, maybe getting it in against that is good. I'm going to call. Yeah, I think my logic was pretty good with the call reasoning. We're never going to fold the river, just in case they do have some of those bluffs. Once they check, I think this is an easy value jam. Maybe they'll trap us with some 6x, but wow. Ace king offsuit. I did not see that coming. I did not see that one coming. Check raise turn, check call river. That is very unique. That is very unique. Yeah, so I would probably spend some time in the solver looking through why exactly the solver wants to check raise small blind on turn and then, check call river. I understand the check call river because at that point, my range is going to have a lot of missed spades, right? So we're going to have hands like Jack 10 of spades, 10 9 of spades, even Queen Jack of spades, a lot of spade combos that are going to get to the river and have to bluff now, right? So it makes sense for the river to happen, but the turn is actually really interesting to me. Why we see some check raises there, but it might be one of those scenarios where the solver is indifferent to continuing with this hand because yes, it does have showdown value with ace king, but it is hard to realize that equity on a lot of rivers. So maybe we see this kind of like mergey type of like check raise for value, check, try to get to showdown on river. I don't know. It's a pretty cool play though. Let's go to the next one. Ace 10 9. We should have seen a large frequency of betting on this texture, I would have guessed, for the small blind. But once they do check, so this is a texture where we were going to bet 50 or check, I think, and we rolled high, so we're going to check this time, and we do see that strategy. We see a lot of bet 50 here, a little bit of bet 33 as well, but for the most part, bet 50 or check. On the turn, we do see a straightening card. I don't think I want to raise as a bluff, although it wouldn't be terrible. We do block 7-6 suited, which is relevant here. And we do have decent equity, but I think we just want to see a river with this hand. I don't think we want to turn it into a bluff, but we do, yeah, we do see a little bit of bluff here. And that makes sense to me, right? Because this is going to be towards the bottom of our range. We block some of their value. We have some equity against their strong hands. Makes a lot of sense to turn into a bluff at some frequency. Once the river comes off, this is probably a fold. We do beat broadways that miss, so like king, queen, king, jack, but that's about it. I think the majority is going to fold. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a jam here. We block a7 suited, we block 7-6 suited, and we unblock folds like pocket kings, pocket queens, and 10x. So I don't mind jamming this river. I don't mind jamming this river. I'm going to fold this time. But we do see, yeah, we do see some bluffs here. Not so much a jam, but a raise. Makes sense to me as I just explained my thought process. Villain ended up having a hand they were not folding, so good thing we didn't bluff there. King 8-7. This is a close to range bet, I believe, from the small blind. Let me just double check here. I think we're going to see range bets to the 33 sizing. Pretty close. 11% check. Effectively a range bet. I don't think we're going to fold a pair with a backdoor straight draw like this. So we're going to go ahead and call. We can even raise in position at some frequency. So raising it in position as a bluff is a very tricky thing to get down because it's not always very intuitive at first. Like seeing this hand, you might think, oh, this is a pair, it has showdown value, we got some good backdoor equity. But in reality, the equity realization of this hand is really low. Any overcard is bad for us and is going to have the small blind c-betting turn a lot. So any like queen, jack, 10, ace, all of those cards are bad. And then if the card does brick off, we're still going to have to face some bets here with this pair. So getting to showdown is difficult, which means if we are, facing a bet and maybe we have the best hand right now, we have some backdoor equity at some, if we do get called, like this could be thrown into a raise in position as like a semi bluff. Which is something I don't do enough of, but I would like to incorporate more in my game. Okay, so again, same idea as the sevens hand. I think we could see both options here, raise or call. This time, however, we're not really blocking relevant hands, right? Because they don't have 6-5 suited, so having pocket sixes here isn't as good as having sevens on the other texture. So I think we're going to see more call, less bluff. And if we were going to bluff, it would be from some like 10x combos or jack x combos. Now we get to the river. Still, I think this is not a good hand to bluff with, just bad blockers. I think I'm going to pure fold. This may be a case of like, okay, we're getting to the river with our worst kind of hand. We might bluff, but I think we still have hands like ace 10 that have a straight. What else would be weak that makes hands on river? I'm trying to think of bluffs that would be natural here that we float the turn with. I think 7-6 would provide to be a better bluff here because I think they're going to bet call pocket sevens at some frequency. So having 7-6 would be a better bluff than sixes. Having something like maybe queen 9 suited that floated flop and got to turn. That would be a good bluff. Ace 9 suited. Maybe. So I think using a pair on the board is going to be more effective than sixes because at least we're blocking trips that are going to bet call here. So I'm going to fold, and let's take a look at what the bluffs are. This is probably my favorite thing to do when I'm studying, is try and guess exactly what the bluffs are, and then see for myself on the river what we're going to end up bluffing. So our all-in hands are going to come from the weak ones anyway. The weak ones are 7-6 suited, so there you go. There's a little bit of that. Queen 9 suited, there you go. That's in there. Ace 9 suited, that's in there too. Queen, ace queen. That's an interesting double float, which I didn't think of off the bat, but makes a lot of sense. Pocket queens. This one makes a lot of sense as well to bluff. Blocking queen 10 suited, right? Gets king X to fold, gets some sets to fold perhaps. So pretty cool bluff there. And then we actually have all of these lower pocket pairs, which might be surprising to some, but it's one of those scenarios where it's just going to be the worst possible hand we have, and we unblock folds from better hands. So if we see a jam here, we can see that king X is going to have to fold at a high frequency. Queen 9 is going to have to fold at a high frequency. Queen Jack. Hands like this are all, you know, ahead of the low pocket pairs, but have to fold. And we unblock all of them, right? So that's the other thing, is we unblock the folds, and we get a lot of better hands to fold. So that combined, we can see some low pocket pairs be used as a bluff when there is a 4 straight out there. But I think the best hands to bluff with, the highest equity or highest EV hands to bluff with, are going to be ones that have relevant blockers. So like we saw, a hand like Queen 9 is a very good bluff. And maybe something like, yeah, pocket queens is going to be, they all seem to be close to 0 EV, so I don't think it's going to be that much of a difference between them. But typically you will see some hand that pure takes a line. I guess the low pocket pairs are actually maybe the best ones to bluff with. Let's take a look at the EV. So you can check the EV as well. So you can see pocket 2s is 0.04 EV, whereas something like queens is 0.03, queen 9 suited. Okay, so I think queen 9 suited, like we mentioned, is going to be the best one to bluff here at 0.24 EV. That's a lot of EV for turning a hand into a bluff. You don't usually see that much in that spot. Cool. All right. Let's go over one more hand and we'll wrap it up. Jack 2-2. So this is another scenario where villain bets 3/4 pots. We can be very selective against 3/4 pot. We don't have to continue very often versus this large sizing. I think for the most part, we can have a fold or a call. I don't think we're going to see much jam on a paired board, but maybe it's incorporated in there. I think this one is going to be indifferent to continuing. Anytime we see a 3/4 pot, although this is pretty high up in our range, I think any pair below a jack, we're going to be kind of indifferent. But, I rolled a 69. Nice. But I don't know. If we're indifferent, this is a fold, I think, at this frequency. Otherwise, it's going to be a pure call. Let's go with call. I think call is a safe bet. I don't think we're going to pure fold here. Yeah, there is a fold frequency, but like I said, I think the solver is going to be mostly indifferent with pairs under a jack when we're facing the 3/4 sizing. Turn is now tricky because we have a lot of strong hands for calling the flop that are going to naturally be able to just call turn with no problem. So pocket 9s, pocket queens, pocket jacks, ace jack, jack X, right? All of these combos that floated are going to have an easy call on turn. So we don't need to reach too far into our range here because villain is repping a very strong hand after 3/4 and then half pot. This is a turn that's going to induce a lot of bluffing with hands like queen 10, king queen. Yeah, King 10, King Queen, Queen 10, backdoor hearts, 10-8 suited. We unblock all of that, so maybe we call here. I'm going to fold because I just feel like we can just select from a smaller pool of hands that makes more sense to continue, like ace jack. But yeah, you see like the solver's just kind of indifferent between everything. Because of what I just mentioned, we're ahead of some of the weak hands, right? But we're also absolutely drawing dead against other hands or drawing to 2 outs. And then there's other hands that have us like, you know, flipping with strong equity, like Queen 10 of hearts. So it's kind of a unique scenario in that the solver's like, okay, well, we're ahead of a bunch of their bluffs. Makes sense for us to just realize equity now and jam. Because I don't think we're going to see any folds from better hands, right? I don't think they're doing this with pocket tens. I don't think they're going to bet fold to jack. So I think we see a lot of just weaker draw heavy hands get it in with sevens, in which sevens is ahead of. So like I said before, hearts that are going to bet call here. Perhaps there's some 9x that we get to fold, but I think if we jam here, it's actually like an equity realization / value tactic with sevens. So we see the bet calls of the weak and trash hands. We'll see that the weak hands, like I mentioned, are going to be hands like Queen 10, Ace 10 of hearts. Any suited ace heart is going to have to bet call, which we're ahead of. Ace King is going to sometimes bet call. King Queen, again, is going to bet call. So you see a very like interesting interaction here with the large sizing and then the half pot sizing. And you can see here that sevens, all of the pairs are going to kind of mix here with a jam. And then, yeah, 4s and 3s are going to be the ones that give up. Makes sense. Makes sense. Interesting hands to finish off with. There's a lot of jamming versus this half pot sizing, surprisingly. But this is something I'm not doing enough of. I'm definitely not finding a lot of these jams. I think it has a lot to do with this unique turn interaction, creating a lot of like semi bluffs for the small blind. If we saw something like a 3 offsuit, I think we'll see a lot different. No, there's still a lot of jams, but not nearly as many jams. We do still see some jams here from the medium pocket pairs. So I guess same logic as before. A lot of their continuation bets are going to be hands that have equity against us, but this time they might have to bet fold if I jam. Let's see. This time I think we're just folding out most of those combos, right? Yeah, so this is more about a jam for protection because there's not going to be too many hands that bet call that we're actually ahead of, other than ace 5 and ace 4. Maybe a little bit of ace king, but yeah, interesting. Cool spot. I think these kinds of scenarios really highlight how deep you can go with the solvers, how deep you can try and find some heuristics from these scenarios, and get a better idea of game theory, right? Because this is what it is broken down to its core, is game theory. The solver is trying to create an equilibrium between 2 ranges, and understanding how those two ranges interact is going to help you better understand the equilibrium, which is going to help you understand your entire strategy as a solver, right? So pretty cool spot. Dove deep on some ideas, and we're going to continue these scenario study sessions. Next up, I think we're going to be doing the big blind versus the button, which is going to provide for some really cool spots, some more polarized ranges from the 3-bet. And yeah, looking forward to the next one. So if you did like this video, please like and subscribe. It will help support and encourage me to continue making this content. I will see you guys on the next video.